Well, hello, everybody, and thank you for joining this month's edition of our technology series with our partners at Dell. My name is Mike Shelah. I am the Director of Marketing and Business Development for Advantage Industries. So if this is your first time joining us, the idea behind this series is to bring real, practical, useful advice to business owners and business leaders, particularly in the Mid-Atlantic marketplace, for things they should be doing with their technology. If you have watched previous episodes, then you will recognize Loren Larson from Dell Technologies. We did a fantastic episode a few months back around CMMC. And if any of you have listened to my podcast, Mike and Allison After Hours, then you will recognize my resident cybersecurity insurance expert, Joe Brunsman. Loren, Joe, thank you both for being on this month's episode.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. So this month we are focusing in on ransomware, and the conversation. Joe and Loren and I had a green room conversation about this Tuesday afternoon, and it got really interesting because ransomware is in the news every single day. And I want to be clear, you cannot 100% prevent ransomware. So strategically today, what we want to look at is what are the things that you should be doing that you're not? And how do we know you're not? Because 80% of businesses we know don't have half these tools that we're going to be talking about today. And then the other side of that is, well, strategically, what do you do to handle ransomware when it occurs? And Joe's going to bring expertise on both sides of the table for that, because frankly, he's involved in both sides. He's helping people prepare, and then he's helping people deal with the aftermath. And so is Loren from a technology standpoint. So let's set the table, gentlemen. There are a lot of ways that ransomware can get into a business, and we're not going to talk about that specifically today. We'll get a little bit into it. But ransomware, very frankly, is a bad person or a hacker or a bad actor. I love that term. Actor. Encrypts a computer or multiple computers or a server or your entire network and demands payment in return for releasing your data. And if you refuse to pay it, some of them will even say, okay, well, if you don't pay, I'm just going to publish all of your data, which for a hospital that is handling PHI, that could be very bad. For a government entity or a government contractor, that could be really bad. So, Loren, why don't you give us a couple minutes, your thoughts on my ransomware definition and what color and context you would add, and then Joe will give you the chance to do the same thing.
Okay, thanks, Mike. So to give you a little background at first, I wanted to just kind of give you an idea of what we are doing at Dell in terms of the services we have around ransomware and things that we can do to help you to prevent that. First and foremost, though, is one of the positions I have at Dell is performing as what we call an incident commander when there is a ransomware attack on one of our clients, and they hire us to come in, assist them, and recover, not only just eradicate the threat actor or the cyber terrorist, if you want to call them for lack of a better term, but help them eradicate and then help recover and get back on their feet. This has become a huge business for Dell because we've got
unfortunately
thousands of clients. Yeah, it's unfortunate because I would rather not meet you as a victim of a ransomware attack. I would rather meet you in the opportunity to help you be proactive and avoid that ever occurring, or as best possible, put yourself in the best position, best light to recover easier and more quickly and with as little inconvenience, if you will, as possible. Unfortunately, I've been into hospitals, I've been into manufacturers, I've been into retail chains, and the worst thing for me is to come in, you are a business owner, you've started your business 17 years ago, you've got thousands of people working for you, and these terrorists have basically come in, taken it over, they've been residing on your network for probably 4 or 5 months, and they figured out the best way possible to take you down. You may think that you are safe because you're obscure little organization that you don't have any PII or there is nothing else out there. That doesn't matter. They're going to find out the best way to make you pay. And so if it means that they can lock up all your machines so that you can't conduct business, there's your availability. If they want to take your data and basically blackmail you with it later on, that's what they're going to do. And they're going to find out what they can do to make you experience the most pain possible so that you can pay. So that's the key thing is don't get yourself into that position. You've got to prepare up in advance and make sure you are ready in the event that something happens. And we've put together a lot of services and tools now at Dell and with our partners that will help you survive better if there is such an occurrence that takes place in your organization. So,
Loren, I love that point that you made. And Joe, I'm going to have you elaborate on this because I know you've got some good thoughts on this. There are these cyber myths that businesses operate under a lot. One of the ones that I see all the time that I have to over-educate people on is, well, I have an IT company, so they're taking care of that. And the answer is probably not. Yeah, they're probably doing antivirus. They probably installed a firewall. Maybe they installed a backup. But that tends to be the end of the list. So they're not being terribly proactive. And then the other one, which Joe, I know you hear every day, is, well, I'm too small. You know, I've got 10 employees. Nobody's looking for me. I'm in this little boutique niche industry, and nobody cares about my data. I know, Joe, you see all that as well. So, welcome to the presentation today, and let's hear your thoughts.
Yeah. So if you're any business connected to the internet at this point, you are going to be a target. And I can say that not just in a theoretical sense, because your IP address is effectively the same as everybody else's IP address, right? It's just a bunch of numbers. So the bad guys don't care. They're going to get money wherever they can. But I can say that from experience. I mean, just my own client base all over the country, big guys, small guys, everybody's getting hit with ransomware. And frankly, when we talk about ransomware, I think Loren had a really good point there where they're going to do everything they possibly can to generate the maximum amount of revenue from that event. So, as a business owner, if you're not kind of in this world, right, you may think, okay, ransomware is bad guy comes in, encrypts my files, I got to pay to get them restored. But there's more to it than that. There can be different levels of encryption. So they're going to get you to pay multiple times. There's going to be double extortion events where, hey, if you don't give us another extortion payment, then we're going to publish this all online. And now we're seeing triple extortion events where they're doing the initial extortion. Then they're saying, hey, we stole your information. If you don't pay up, we're going to publish that. And then they're going after your clients and personally trying to extort them. And so we've seen that specifically at medical institutions.
Wow. I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, I could absolutely see where that would be great for the hacker, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Let me just
price of one.
Yeah. And let me just point out from the liability side, that is a nightmare. I mean, like, your legal counsel is probably going to tell you, dude, you got to pay up here, because let's say, for example, you're either going to pay a couple $100,000 more so that they don't, personally extort your clients, or if this stuff gets published, I mean, the lawsuits, the class action claims, they're going to keep you in court for the next 5 years.
Every single incident. Yeah.
Oh, it's going to be a nightmare for you. So you're really kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. So take this from the insurance guy, right? Obviously, I make more money the worse the world gets. You don't want to call me more than once a year, right? Like, you don't just want to necessarily rely on your insurance to come in and solve all the problems for you. So if you're a business owner and you have thankfully never fallen victim to ransomware, or I should say you haven't fallen victim yet to ransomware, right? It's hard for me to explain to you how time-consuming, stressful, and difficult that process is. So a business owner may just think, oh, well, I have insurance. So, I'm on a beach for a week. All the vendors take care of everything. And then they pay the ransom. I'm back up and running. And it was just a short, vacation. It's somewhat inconvenient, but I'm back to business as usual. That is not the case whatsoever. Like there is so
Nope.
much more to it than anybody realizes until they have to go down that path. And I think once they realize they've gone down that path, suddenly these expenditures for fundamental cybersecurity controls, mapping to a framework, endpoint security, all this stuff really becomes a lot more palatable. So I would just say, take it from the insurance guy who's dealt with probably well over 100 ransomware events at this point, just from my own client base. You don't want to be in that position. So you need to do everything you reasonably can to avoid calling me more than once a year, right? So like as the cyber insurance guy, best case scenario, we talk once a year, I take your money, that's it. You call me twice a year, you're probably having a bad day, right? And it's, once again, it's way more stressful and time consuming. There's so much more that goes into it. You know, you're going to be juggling as a business owner, 100 balls in the air. So just please avoid that and take that seriously. And, for some industries, I'll leave at this point. For some industries, it's becoming almost impossible to get cyber insurance. It's like
I can imagine.
Yeah, so like if you're a manufacturer, you probably don't have social security numbers or your payment card numbers per se. Maybe you could have a social engineering loss, but the issue is your business interruption costs are just astronomical, right? And you can think for ransomware, the average downtime is 16 days. If you're a manufacturer, literally it's for 16 days, you didn't make this widget. Because you didn't make this widget, you didn't make money. That's a huge business interruption cost just right there. And cyber insurance companies are getting smart. They've been losing a whole lot of money for a long time. And so, effectively moving forward, when people come to me and they don't have just basic cybersecurity controls, it's like there's going to come a point, and it already is with some industries, where you just won't get those quotes. Like it just gets game over. So take it from the insurance guy.
Yeah. So Joe, you made a couple of fantastic points there that I want to build on a little, and then I want to get Loren's response because I know he has some smart things to say about this. It's not either or. You need a solid cyber insurance plan that is very meticulously detailed and reviewed by somebody like myself or somebody like Loren, who's on your side from a technology standpoint, because that's got to be reviewed. I think I've told both of you this story. I was working with the logistics company a few months back, about 350 employees, and they have a cyber insurance plan. And it was right at renewal date. We were having a meeting with their CIO. He has a team of about 5 guys. So he's got a decent sized IT team for the number of people that they support. And I asked him about his cybersecurity insurance. He goes, "Oh, we just renewed that." And I said, "Great. Who on your team looked at the policy?" He goes, "What?" I said, "Who on your IT team looked at the policy to make sure that it matches what you guys have in place?" He said, "Well, none of us did." I said, "Well, that's really bad, because as you just pointed out, particularly the COVID, when COVID hit, the insurance companies, who are the paramount of assessing risk, they're better at assessing risk than almost anybody on the planet. And they bet wrong and they took a bath. So now they're revising it. And as you mentioned in our green conversation the other day, they're kind of throwing the kitchen sink at customers now and saying, "Well, tell us all of this. It may or may not be relevant, but we want to know. We have to know these things." So, what I know is 80% of businesses that have 200 employees or less have never had an independent third-party audit voluntarily. I'll add that word. The number's probably a little better for the ones that were told they need one, but voluntarily, so they don't have the tools. And then so when I come in, or when Loren and his team come in and they start evaluating, it's like, my God, how are you still in business? So I'll give a great example, which both of you guys get. NIST 800-171, which is the granddaddy of compliance, has 110 control requirements. And each one of those, so talk about time consuming, Joe, and then Loren, I'll let you get in. each requirement could have 5 to 15 sub items that are all if then. So if you're doing this, then we need to do that. So when we talk to people about doing a proper audit, we're telling them it's a 9 to 12 month process to go not through the evaluation, but the evaluation and the remediation plan. So figuring out what's broken and then fixing it. So Loren, I know you've got some great stories around that. So please, share your thoughts with what Joe and I just shared.
Sure. I've been doing security assessments for federal agencies going back to 2005, and I worked in that space up until about 2016. And it started out using self-assessments, and those were a bit of a joke. And then we moved over to and evolved into the NIST 853 framework, which is specifically tailored and identified to federal agencies. I'm also what is known as a FedRAMP third-party assessor, and that's a 3PAO. And so I'll go out and work with companies that want to do business with the federal government and help them go through the process, assess, and figure out, just as you mentioned, where are their deficiencies, their gaps, and what they need to do to fix that. The NIST 800-171 is targeted to, right now, the organizations that are doing business with defense agencies. There's also other frameworks out there that those two that I just mentioned are very complicated and very detail oriented.
As opposed to all the simple ones out there.
Right. And the simple ones are still pretty good. But one of the key points that you made is that to prepare your organization to go through that audit, it does take anywhere from 6 to 9 months to basically put together the entire security plan that you need, all the policies, procedures, and then there's plans or plans of surrounding the different areas, like an incident response plan, a disaster recovery plan. And all these plans basically identify the steps that you would take in the event something occurs. So to get prepared, it's not easy, especially if you're going for some sort of certification. If you're just trying to, from an organizational standpoint, figure out what your current maturity level is of implementing cybersecurity best practices, we've got the opportunity to bring in tools and help you do that. One of the things Joe mentioned, though, is that the average time for a ransomware recovery is 16 days. My experience, when I've gone into these places, we've been in there 3 months. We've brought in over 80 different subject matter experts to help you.
Yes, optimistic.
Well, it goes a long way. So, I mean, if you've got so many ransomware attacks, it gets down to 16 days. That's the thing. Problem is, though, if you're hit and you pay that ransom, it's not done. You really need to make sure that that threat actor is gone out of your environment, and that takes a lot of work. I mean, it could mean to the point where you have to build a whole new green field and of your computing environment just to put your data in there. So it's not something you want to do. What you need to do is figure out right now what you don't know about your environment and what you need to do to make it better. And getting a security assessment based on whatever is probably the first step in that direction, just so that you can at least figure out, okay, so we thought we were practicing security quite well. We bought a bunch of tools. I was on a ransomware event that took place in the city of Atlanta back in 2016. The people there thought that they were going to be in great shape, and so they have all these tools. And then they said, oh, yeah, all of our vendors were watching them and doing it for us. And that was not the case. The first thing that the ransomware attackers did is they came in and they wiped out all their backups. And then when they went to try and go pay the ransomware, the opportunity to do that was destroyed because one of the employees took a picture of the ransomware message, put it on Facebook, and then all kinds of people started going to the site where you can make the payment. Well, the ransomware business has intermediaries, third-party individuals who negotiate and help get the money and give it to the ransomware attacker. They even got help desks. They're very nice people. If they catch you, they'll say, hey, we'll help you. We'll help you rebuild and get all your stuff back up. But that's something that you may not get that opportunity, because if for some reason, like the website that went down for the city of Atlanta back in 2016 happens, then you don't know who else is coming at you and say, hey, yeah, you can pay us and we'll give you the key. And that didn't happen. So they had to go through and rebuild a whole new environment and everything else. So these are nightmare scenarios, and it's not a good thing. And it's much better to get in there and start being proactive if you've never even started doing cybersecurity within your organization.
So, Loren, I'm going to highlight two things. I think if we're building a plan for the audience listening, these first two things really jump out to me. And then, Joe, I'm going to let you build on it because I know you've got some great thoughts on this. But the first thing that I'm hearing is you've got to be proactive. So much of what's going on in IT today is reactive. There's a fire, let's put out the fire. But let's prevent the fire from happening. So regardless of your industry, pick a cybersecurity hygiene. Pick PCI. Okay, yeah, it's the simplest one, but it's better than, again, 80% of the businesses in the marketplace right now. So I just brought on a client last week. They are a global company that helps students get education in the United States. And I'll leave it at that without a whole lot of explanation. So they could do PCI because they process payments. They could do HIPAA because they have the students' medical records. They chose GDPR because they're a global organization. Now, doing any one of those would have strategically made a lot of sense for them. So the first point is talk to somebody smart like Loren or talk to somebody smart like Joe to get their feedback on what you're trying to accomplish. But choosing a discipline, being proactive, and then Joe, I know your industry's a big fan of this, but it's the policies and procedures that make the difference. It's the documentation. It's the what are we going to do? So, Joe, please give us from the insurance perspective your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So, as we used to say in the Navy, failing to plan is planning to fail. And so, it's like when something occurs at a business, there are multiple steps that kind of need to happen simultaneously, right? There's a lot that actually goes into that. Quick warning, because I've dealt with this before, please do not have your incident response plan saved on your network and not physically printed out somewhere. I say that from experience dealing with one of my clients.
Bonus pro tip for the audience today.
Yeah, but there's a lot that needs to happen. And frankly, one of the mistakes I see people making is, well, there's a couple. One, they think that defense in depth is having a cyber insurance policy, and that is not the case, right? Like cyber insurance is arguably the last element that you want to have. It's kind of like you wouldn't just buy health insurance and then eat yourself into a diabetic coma, understanding that like, oh, well, it's cool, I have health insurance. It's like, no, it's going to be a painful process. But two, part of this is understanding your cyber insurance policy. That's a legal contract, right? And so the issue that people are having
Great
is
point.
Not only is there a complete lack of knowledge in my industry surrounding what those policies actually mean, what they actually say, there's a huge issue just on the compliance side with those policies, right? So every legal contract, both parties have some responsibility there. And so businesses are just assuming like, oh, well, I bought a cyber insurance policy, I'm good. Well, cyber insurance, that's not a legal term. It's not even an insurance industry term. It's just this idea that people have that when something happens with a computer, that somehow there's insurance for that. And that's just not the case, right? So there's not only do you have to understand what your requirements are under the policy. So like a lot of CFOs are getting surprised now, and you'll kind of read the stories if you know where to look, where they didn't realize that, oh yeah, maybe they have $250,000 in social engineering coverage, but that's only if these specific controls were first met, right? There was like a pre-established callback number. And so they didn't know that because they'd never been taught. And so lo and behold, I'll be damned. Like turns out they just lost $250,000 or more. And there's effectively no insurance for that because they didn't go through. It wasn't in the policies. It wasn't in their procedures, right? Because cyber really, it impacts every area of a business at this point. So like, there's just way more to it than I think people realize. And they also need to understand there's a lot of stuff that cyber insurance just legally cannot cover. And that's a mistake that my industry has made, where they're saying, I mean, we're talking about ransomware, where they're saying, hey, average business asks average insurance guy, if I get hit with ransomware, is this going to pay the extortion? Average insurance guy goes, yes, there's a ransomware extortion line item on your policy. Those of us who really dig into this stuff can tell you that's not always the case, right? Which is why cyber insurance is last in line on defense in depth. It's because under certain circumstances, you may get hit with a strain of ransomware that's actually on the OFAC sanctioned list. And you can rest assured, no cyber insurance company out there is going to risk being sanctioned by the United States government because they paid a ransomware demand on your behalf as a business, right? So, these are kind of all the things where this has to become.
There's a lot of layers to that onion, Joe.
Yeah, there's a lot to it. And you have to think about cyber insurance and kind of the grander scheme of insurance. But that's why, for example, when MSPs, when tech guys are harping on backups, multiple backups, different types of backups, 3-2-1 backup strategy, like there's a very good reason for that. Because if you get hit and we can't pay the ransom by law, you better hope you have the right backups in place, or you may just have to shut the lights off and shut the business down at that point. If there's nothing to go back to and you can't pay the ransom, like you're done. It's over.
Joe, I love what you just brought up there, because it's a great springboard into what I want to ask Loren next. Having a backup strategy, not just from a device and process standpoint, but that also builds on, we built this online cybersecurity questionnaire that anybody can go to our website now, and they can take it just to assess themselves, get a sense of how good or how bad off they are. Backup is one of those things, but we know the insurance companies are starting to ask about MDR, managed detection and response. They're starting to ask about MFA, and not just MFA on email. I mean, it's great. You turn it on with 365 and it makes your business way more secure. And by the way, people, that doesn't cost you a penny. If you're already a 365 subscriber, turn it on. It'll take you 15 minutes per person in your company to set it up. And it's one of the best ways to secure your business. But now the insurance companies are saying, okay, well, I want MFA on every piece of software that your business uses. And I want a documentation of what software are you using? How is it 5? Is it 10? Is it 20? And Loren, so I know you're answering questions like that all the time. So I mentioned MFA, I mentioned MDR. Got any other acronyms you want to spit out at us?
Well, one of the key points that you've mentioned, though, is the backups. Right now, that's one of the first things when a hacker gets into your environment. They're going to be there, and they're going to be dormant, or they're going to be quietly in the background, and they're going to look for your backups and things like that. And one of the first things they're going to do is encrypt that and take it out. So just having backups, and you think you're safe, may not be the case. You need to be testing your backups, making sure that you actually can recover from them. You need to have a second and a third level line of backups. At this point, we are now working with companies to implement cyber vaults that we are manufacturing that help take all of your data that is the most critical key data and place it into this vault. And it's a one-way stream in. And as soon as that backup has finished, the connection is shut down. And this is siloed now. This information is there, immutable copies, and you can't get to it. So it's a very key last line of defense where all your other backups that you thought were doing well have been destroyed. And this is the one where you break the glass and you can get your data back out and you can get to it. But that's if in the event of something really bad, then you have to have that. But you have to practice this opportunity of getting your data back, not just from the vault, but also your other backups. The managed detection and response, we at Dell currently and our partners are doing now 24/7 monitoring of organizations. Right? Yeah, I mean, like
the bad guys are all over the globe, so it's the middle of the night for them right now, but that's working hours.
Right. And as an organization, do you have the staff that can actually monitor and keep on top of all the alerts that pop up? You implement, your endpoint protection device, like the antivirus and the next gen antivirus. You have a SIM tool that captures this data. You've got all this information coming in, and you're going to get alerts all the time. And so you'll never quite feel comfortable enough to know that your information is being acted upon by everybody who's supposed to be within your organization. So one of the things is now as a service is the opportunity to get that 24/7 monitoring where an event pops up, our teams will take a look at it. And if it looks like it's something that needs to be addressed, then they'll go in there and start a process, notify you, and then start the process to help you stop the issue from occurring. So there's those are some of the key things that are out there right now. But as Joe was saying, though, it doesn't just start with an insurance plan and a few tools. You've got to really get prepared and plan things out and be ready, and know if your capabilities are there. And then if you don't, then put together a roadmap, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year, of what things that you need to do to gradually improve your security posture.
So I think item number 3 for our audience is they want to have someone like you, Loren, or someone like me communicating with their insurance guy, Joe. You want to make sure, and because it's not adversarial, we're working in conjunction to best protect the client. So if there's a line missing, it's that old, the chink in the armor. We want to make sure that there are no chinks in the armor. We want to make sure that it is as resilient as possible. And again, nothing is perfect, which is the reason why we need both sides, but we need those two sides to also communicate. So item number 3, takeaway number 3 today is have your technology experts communicating with your insurance experts. Again, I say this about Joe because he has an engineering background and he has a technical background, and he really understands not just insurance, but cyber insurance in particular. It's a little bit of a nerd thing for him. And you want that in your experts. You want a little nerd in them because, Joe, I know you're looking at that tool list when you talk to your clients and saying, you really should have this, right?
Yeah. And if I could add maybe bullet point number 4 as a takeaway for everybody here.
Please.
So, businesses need to realize, what do states attorneys general want to actually do? They want to run for Congress. What's a great thing they put their hat on? Consumer protection. And so there's a lot of misconceptions about what could actually be legally required for a business to hold, right? So it's not even, half the time I'm talking to people and it's not even just, hey, this is a really good idea, you have this thing. It's, hey, this may be a legal requirement that you hold this. So we'll take a business that, let's say they don't fall under HIPAA High-Tech or Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act or any of these other big kind of overarching federal cybersecurity laws. Well, there's breach notification laws. And that's kind of a bad term because half of those breach notification laws actually have cybersecurity requirements built into them. Some of them may even have something that sounds somewhat innocuous, like reasonable cybersecurity requirements. And what does reasonable cybersecurity actually mean? The best way to explain that is, let's say you're at the wrong end of a very long table, and there's a whole bunch of government bureaucrats standing at the other end, and they're going through 800.171, or they're going through NIST CSF or some ISO, right? And they're going line by line, and they're saying, explain to me after this event now why you didn't have this control in place. And you have to be able to sit there as a business owner and logically explain to them why you did or didn't have something. So like when Loren was talking,
I don't know doesn't count.
Yeah, that's not going to cut it, right? So like when Loren was saying, have a plan of attack, right? Like at least have a plan of attack, right? So you can say, this was our document. We were going to do these things. There's budget requirements, which obviously government bureaucrats don't really understand budget requirements for the average business. But at least you can say I had something in place. And one of the points here is another thing that my industry has done terribly is regulatory fines and penalties. Can you get coverage for that under a cyber policy? Yes, you can. The operative term there is where insurable by law. Where are those regulatory fines and penalties for lack of appropriate cybersecurity controls insurable by law? I have no idea. I've spent hundreds of hours. I've talked to every cyber attorney that I can get my paws on, right? That's like notable in this space. None of us have any clue. And that's because there's no case law to look at, or the states have already gone after those people, but there was obviously a settlement because that business doesn't want their name in the news for lack of cybersecurity and getting investigated by some regulator somewhere. So you could just assume, like, one, obviously get the technical side, get the insurance side, also get that legal side, because there's probably way more in terms of mandatory cybersecurity controls, I think, than 99.9% of businesses actually realize at the end of the day.
Yeah, Joe, I love that. You made a couple of excellent points there. I'm going to touch on both of them and then give Loren a chance to contribute. That there's a lot without precedent, right? It's as simple as that. Loren mentioned 2016 ransomware. Well, you know what? That might have been the first ransomware attack because we didn't really have ransomware much before 2016. This is in the space of things, it's a relatively new item we have to protect against. So, and I know, Joe, you and I have talked about this extensively. Every state has their own unique cyber laws. Now, some are a little more hairy than others. New York Shield comes to mind. That's a pretty significant one. California is pretty strong too. Texas is pretty strong. But every state has these laws. And as you just pointed out, navigating that, even the most savvy and experienced attorneys, they're going to struggle with that. So you have to put some due diligence. So the more you've documented that you're taking reasonable and appropriate action, to borrow from HIPAA, the more you can document that and say, hey, look, we had MDR on our roadmap. It was going to be implemented in next quarter. That's better than saying, what's MDR? I don't know what that is. I have no idea.
And one thing I should have added there, another giant misconception that business owners have, if they're listening to this, maybe they're going, I'm not in Massachusetts, so I don't have to deal with 201 CMR 17, or I'm not in New York, so I don't have to deal with the New York Shield Act. That is false. So the breach notification law that applies, it doesn't matter where your business is located. It's where your client is a resident of.
Yep.
So let's say you're a business next to a military base. You may have to deal with all 50 different state and territory breach notification laws and all 50 different state and territory cybersecurity requirements, on top of potentially, PCI DSS, Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, et cetera, et cetera. So there's way more to this than I think the average business owner really realizes, and they should just keep in mind, once again, I have no idea if that's insurable or not.
And Joe, I love that. So Loren, I'm going to hand this off to you. I think so many business owners and business leaders are just overwhelmed when they hear a presentation like this. So it's that paralysis of analysis. It's like, well, gee, it's like no matter what I do, I'm still screwed. So I'm not going to do anything. So Loren is a technology expert. How are you untangling this mess for your clients? Walk us a little through the process that you take to help simplify this for them and make them feel a little better so they can sleep better at night.
Well, there's two problems with all of these laws that have been coming out in terms of data protection and people's privacy. The legislators think we've done a great thing. We've come up with this law and we say you have to have these policies and procedures in place, but they don't tell you really in detail what they're asking you to do. And so there's a lot of misconception and a lot of not understanding what these controls are and what it really means to implement them. So many times I work with a customer and we're saying, okay, this control here says you have to, and it's very vague and it's in these laws. So the best way around it is to adopt a cybersecurity framework of some sort that is prescriptive enough that it gives you
like
enough.
PCI or HIPAA or GDPR.
the Center for Internet Security's critical security controls, ISO 27002, whatever. But if you pick one, those will address and map to, as Joe was mentioning earlier, some of these PCI, the HIPAA, the requirements that are out there. The problem, though, is it just doesn't end with the one-time deal. You start out and you get your plan in place, but organizations are absorbing risk all the time. Through mergers and acquisitions, you are probably gathering up all kinds of technologies and absorbing them into your environment and not knowing what is probably bad within there. So as you're doing these things, you should probably take a proactive view of what it is you're consuming from this new merger or acquisition. We've got a client right now, we're doing an assessment on one of their companies that they just purchased. And through the process, they were concerned right up front. And I knew why, because the company they purchased was a small business with not a big overhead IT team. They built this platform that's on the web, and these systems are web facing to the internet. We came in and started doing the security assessment. We found that all the servers that they've built this on are currently operating on unsupported software, and they're missing operating systems. Yep, and they're missing key patches and critical things of that nature. And yet these things are facing out into the internet, and so there's a ton of vulnerabilities that are potentially there. Well, we found out after further going through their Azure environment, one of their employees actually was logging in from Jordan in the Middle East, from Syria, and some other places. And these guys are in this state right now where they're not allowed to travel. And so this guy wasn't doing that. So we found that they were actually already infiltrated. And so we're in the process of helping them get through there. But what my point is, though, is going through this merger and acquisitions part, you're absorbing risk all the time. You also have vendors that work for you or provide you things, and you don't know what their process is. I'm working with the various different clients and helping them put together a good vendor security assessment program to help them ensure that their people that are providing them are secure. The vector into an organization doesn't have to be just one of your employees doing something.
In the HIPAA world, that's being a business associate, right?
Yep, a business associate or something along those lines. And they may have a feed into your organization, and through that feed, they could come in and start attacking you. So understanding what the controls are that will help prevent that from occurring, and then understanding what you don't know about what your security posture is the key ways to go about that. And understanding what these practices are, what they're asking you is oftentimes it's like judging a book by its cover, and you think the title says one thing, but when you actually get into the meat of these things, there's a lot more to it. So
yeah,
that's why we're here to help you navigate
you
that.
Get the title, and then you get a lot of words in the book. But
Right,
Loren,
right.
you made a great point there. Getting a pen test, good idea for a company. Getting a PCI audit, getting a HIPAA audit, getting a GDPR audit, getting a CMMC audit. These are all good things. You know, depending on your industry, you know, pick the one that best aligns, and talk to somebody like Loren or like myself or like Joe that have an understanding of industry guidelines and say, look, you're in this industry. This one probably best aligns with you. But you have to take that next step, because you get that audit done, and then the customer goes, what do I do with this? You go, well, you fix it. Well, that's a lot of money, isn't it? Yes, because you've been ignoring this since the day you opened your doors. So now we have to spend a lot of money. And so they'll turn to their IT company, or they'll turn to their guy. They've got an IT guy. They go, well, can you do this? And they go, oh my God, are you kidding me? All the tools I have to buy, this is going to take hundreds of hours, you know, this, and then they go. So again, they get locked up. They get in that paralysis of analysis. And, you know, for our company, we made the decision, look, we're not going to audit anybody anymore. What we know is you're broken from a cybersecurity standpoint. 99 out of 100 times, if a company comes to us, they have things that need to be fixed. So, okay, right off the bat, we're implementing tools to bring people up to the NIST standard. That's phase one. Anybody that comes on board with us, that's just how we're doing our business now. And then if you're a doctor's office, okay, well, let's talk about what doing HIPAA for your business would mean. If you're a retail organization, okay, well, let's talk about what PCI means to your company. If you're a government contractor, okay, let's talk about the fact that if you don't do CMMC, you literally can't do business anymore because those bid requirements are going to start in 2022. And it's not going to be all of them. Somebody gave me a hard time the other day. You're giving the impression, no, starting in 2022, CMMC will be a requirement on government contract bids through the Department of Defense. It's going to take them about 3 years to get all of them. But again, haven't you waited long enough? Start following a framework. And we've developed it as a solution because as Joe has pointed out, as Loren has pointed out, these things are constantly changing. So Joe, I'm going to give you like 5 minutes to give your final thoughts and then we'll get to Loren. This has been a fantastic conversation today, guys. So thank you both very much.
Yeah, so I'd say kind of touching on Lauren's point there. One, according to the FTC, you're legally responsible for the security of your vendors. So like, I mean, most people don't realize that. They're like, oh, wait, what? So, I mean, that's a great place to start, right? Because if you're sending, potentially sensitive information to clients to vendors, if they have access to that, like you're responsible for that, right? Likewise, if they have access to your system, you're probably legally responsible for their security measures, right? So, with that, what happens if they screwed up, right? Or you were sending them information. This happened to a medical office. They were sending medical transcriptions just via voice from the doctor, went overseas to India. Those guys had no cybersecurity whatsoever. That information ended up being publicly available. What happened to that doctor's office? They got a 20-year consent order with about 20 different things that they had to do, which includes every cybersecurity control under the sun that you could imagine, right? That includes, yearly penetration.
Or you shut your doors.
Yeah, or you shut your doors.
Yeah.
And you can't even just shut your doors and start a new business. Those consent orders effectively say, if you start any new business in this area within the next 20 years, you still have to comply with this consent order.
That's specific to you. You get out of healthcare and you go and open up a restaurant or you go and open up a coffee shop. That's you, Bob Smith. That's on you.
Yeah, it's on them. And so, like when I have clients and they have antiquated software, antiquated hardware, things that are public facing that are obviously very high risk. And I start talking to him, I'm like, take it from the guy. I make no money if you buy this equipment, right? But what's going to happen is you're going to have to buy it eventually anyways, because now if you're increasing your odds of a breach, well, now you're going to have to deal with a breach or some type of ransomware event, some cyber event. Now you're going to have to go through all that. And oh, by the way, you can't profit from insurance. So your cyber insurance policy at the end of the day, it's really only designed to get you to back up to where you were before the event occurred. It's not there to make
so if you end up buying a bunch of new servers, the insurance won't cover that.
Yeah, so now you got to deal with all that. And oh, by the way, now you've lowered the available limits or completely exhausted the limits on your cyber insurance policy. And oh, by the way, now your cyber policy is going to be way more expensive next year. It was going to be more expensive even if you didn't have an event. Now it's going to be way more expensive, right? So it just makes sense that people stop thinking about cyber insurance as like the solution to events, because those days are over, right? Like they have to start getting more involved. So they have to start understanding, what framework should I map to? What type of hardware or software is just completely antiquated? That's got to get rocking and rolling. And I understand that a lot of businesses, the reason they're in business is because they're very good at what they do. So when you try to bring in some other element, right? So maybe they're like, I'm an amazing manufacturer or an attorney or an architect or an engineer or whatever the case may be. They're like, this is my life's passion. This is what I'm good at. This is what gets me up in the morning. This is what I get excited about. If I wanted to do cybersecurity, I would have been a cybersecurity guy. I don't want to do that. So, what I tell my clients is there's kind of two things you have to consider. One, bring in the right experts. Yes, it's going to cost money, but your time is worth money. And, so is like your mental well-being and the stress and the time that you're going to throw down after some type of event is way worse than you can even imagine. if you've never gone through it. And two, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? So like you got to start somewhere. The longer you wait to get that process rolling, the more painful it's going to be, just like everything else in life. So you might as well just get the party started now. Just take one step forward, just step after step after step, right? Get updated, have the appropriate policies, procedures, and controls. Just one step after the other. And before you know it, you're going to be in a way better place than you were when you began.
You'll be ahead of 90% of businesses in the marketplace right now. Well said, Joe. Loren, your final thoughts before I wrap us up today?
The one key thing is, and Joe was just touching upon it, for too long, I work with companies and I go in there and I'll do an assessment, and I've come to learn that the C-suite has decided that cybersecurity is too expensive. And over the years, their system administrators have made requests for this or for that, but they've gotten shot down because they don't take cybersecurity seriously. They think it's an overhead burden and they don't want to spend the money on it. And the same thing for a lot of their IT. And so over the years, if you're an organization thought, oh yeah, we're saving thousands and millions of dollars on stuff that we didn't do, you get hit by a ransomware attack, you're going to spend all that money you just saved and then more, because you've probably been breached to the point where you have to replace and repair and fix a whole lot of things. And that in of itself just should take people to take this more seriously. There's a lot of research done by Forrester about how much money the average company spends on IT. And every time I look at that and I talk to these companies, it's very low, but they say the average spend, and people go, well, we're in the average spend. That's good. Now, to me, it's no, you've way underspend and you're not in the greatest position where you think you are. And you probably should take it more seriously. And then cybersecurity is even a smaller chunk of the IT. And that spend, you can't justify it. And so you just decided not to do it. The days of security through obscurity are gone. And the regulations are coming.
That's a quotable. I'm putting that on a pillow, Loren.
Right. But the key thing about the CMMC, as you mentioned, is just right now for defense contractors, that's going to expand to anybody within the federal space. That's coming down the road. So you got to start getting prepared for that. And there's going to be a lot more regulations coming out on businesses, because I think
the hackers
people have gotten fed up. Yeah. And people are getting fed up with so I told you early on, I did a lot of work with federal agencies. I worked for OPM. I did an assessment of some of their systems. I told them that some of the things that they had were wrong. And sure enough, my fingerprints now reside over in China because
Me too.
They got hacked, and I told them what was wrong. So yeah, all that stuff was gone. So, and that's a federal agency, and they're supposed to do things right. And yet so many federal agencies have D pluses on their scorecard for how well they're doing things. Yeah. So you can imagine, as a commercial business, where you are, you know, it's as you were mentioning earlier, Mike, it's like, where do I begin? How do I even begin to tackle this? And as Joe said, eating an elephant bite by bite, but just start out knowing what you don't know and then starting going from there.
Yeah. Can I add one last
Absolutely,
element
Joe.
what Lauren touched on?
Give us a drop of gold.
So this drives me nuts. And once again, take this from the guy where, you know, I don't make any more or less money realistically if you don't buy a bunch of controls, or you do buy a bunch of controls. I mean, like, maybe your cyber insurance goes down, but it's not super material yet because the policies are still so affordable. But the one thing this is what I tell all my clients is, you don't have the budget now, just go do a quick internet search for any breach notification letter, any of them. What is a standard clause in every single one of them? We've increased our cybersecurity budget. We've implemented additional controls. It happens every single time. And they didn't
increase the budget because they felt like it. They increased the budget because they had to. Period. End of story.
And every business owner, without exception, that I've talked to that's dealt with a breach or a ransomware event, they have all said, without exception, man, I wish I just would have paid a little extra money to prevent this in the first place.
Yeah.
Every time.
Yeah. And we've had customers said to us, I wish you came in and scared the hell out of us a long time ago. We would have taken this more seriously. Yep.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think thankfully now, on the insurance side, I think about in terms of regulatory requirements, frameworks, numbers of records. But at the end of the day, like those are real humans. And you can honestly
People's lives are
do
being impacted.
absolutely, you can do irreparable damage to your reputation if you're not taking this seriously. And you can do irreparable damage to somebody's life if you're not taking this seriously. So please, I'm not the guy here saying you got to spend 50% of your annual budget on cybersecurity. I'm not that guy. But what I am saying is you need to have a reasonable stab at making sure that your system is secure. Because if you don't, you're going to find that money after the fact. And that's really the last point at which you want to start investing in cybersecurity. So, obviously, cyber policies, they have their place. They also have their limitations. And there's way more limitations than most people realize, especially in the totality of insurance. So do what you can reasonably beforehand to try and avoid calling me twice in the year.
Yeah, great final thought, Joe. And for our audience today, great place to start. First, you can contact us, answers@getadvantage.com. I will put you in touch with Joe. I will put you in touch with Loren, or you can talk to me directly about whatever your concerns are. But as I mentioned, we've built an online cybersecurity questionnaire. You can go to it completely anonymously. I won't know about it. Loren won't know about it. Joe won't know about it. But you can take those 35 questions and take a hard look at your company and say, well, how bad off am I? And if you look at your results and go, ooh, this isn't good, then we're here to help. I want to underline that. We're here to help. That's why we're doing this monthly education program. And that's why we're answering questions and inviting people to these. We hope that you will share this video with your colleagues and say, I saw something that was very valuable. We like to think that we're bringing smart people together to answer questions that are top of mind for you business owners. Because what we really want, as Joe pointed out, is allow you to be the best in your industry. If you're an attorney, go ahead and be the best attorney. If you're a restaurant owner, go ahead and be the best restaurant. If you're a C-level executive, go be the best C-level executive. Let us handle this aspect of your business so that you don't have to worry about it anymore. For Loren, Larson, and Joe Brunsman, I am Mike Shelah with Advantage Industries. Thank you for tuning into this month's Education Technology Series with our partners, Dell. So thank you again, Dell, very much for today. And we will see you next time. Bye-bye.